Okay, this is a video to kind of explain why I have that small patch of snow on my roof. It's going to be about attic ventilation, attic insulation, ice dams, moss, icicles. It's all of these things. They're all caused by basically the same thing. Um, this roof, you can tell from the shot that it's actually shaded also, and that's one reason why some of that snow is still there. Snow is not on the other uh, roofs, but I noticed those ones aren't shaded. So, okay, I'm gonna go inside and finish this. I'm gonna put this on pause. Okay, these are the front steps. The story picks up here with icicles. Now, the house was built in '84. We moved in about 10 years after that, or 12 years after that. And what would happen is icicles would form every winter, and the icicles would drip down onto the front steps because of that's where the front steps are, right under that roof. And after we had been here for just about 1 or 2 years, all of the bricks started falling apart because the mortar completely dissolved, because my wife had been using a deicer. And she probably wasn't the only one. The previous owners had probably been using deicers over the years, and the deicer gets at the mortar. Okay, so way back then, now more than 20 years ago, I've been here 25 years, probably about 23 years ago or so, I ended up just making new mortar and putting all the bricks back together. Well, now they are starting to come off again. We use the deicer extremely sparingly, but it has been used occasionally over the years, along with the ice chipper. And that's not so good for the bricks either, especially the ones on the end. They can get knocked off when you chip them, try to chip the ice. So the ice would build up, I mean, several, almost a couple inches basically, and it would be like a big hump right here. It was extremely dangerous. Could not use the front door in many cases. Had to try to chip it off, pour boiling water on it, put de-icer on it, come up with various tricks on how to step over it. Okay, I want to hit pause and go inside and show you basically a kind of the next chapter in the story. Okay, now where the story picks up is in the attic. In the attic, after we'd been living here for, oh, I don't know, maybe 6 years or so, we started noticing that there was mold in the attic, and at that time the roof was over 20 years old and it needed a new roof, because the roof tiles were at the end of their life. And we did have someone come in and look at the mold in the attic, and they explained to us, potentially unsafe. And one of the reasons why that mold is there is because water vapor had been coming up from the house and getting up into the attic, and then condensing on the attic roof, that is on the roof boards. And that moisture in the attic then causes mold to grow. Now, at that time, I didn't have this cap for the stairwell, and I didn't have a cap for a whole house fan, which is what you see over there. What I did instead was, in the winter season, I would put a blanket or an old rug over this. It wasn't that good, and moisture would get through it, and the seal wasn't that good, and so a lot of moisture would get up into the attic and cause this mold. As a result of that, when we had the roof replaced, we had all the plywood replaced also. Cost several more thousands of dollars. So, and we had them run a larger soffit vent. So you can see the soffit venting there runs continuously, and it's a relatively larger square area of vent than what was there previously, which was something that was called a Hicks vent, but it was actually a vent that was built into the edge drip. The edge drip actually had little slots in it. This is a separate thing, slots in the soffit board, and it's a much larger area to improve ventilation. And along with the improved ventilation, I had these caps added, and so we figured maybe the mold problem was solved as a result of that. But I did notice, now that was over 20, that was probably 20 years ago or so. I did notice that I did notice some spots where mold was starting to come back. I was concerned about that because I didn't want that to continue any worse. And of course, we still had the problem over the front steps. Now, the reason why we have the problem over the front steps is because, of course, moisture, but heat from the house gets up onto the roof boards, causes not only condensing, but it causes the snow which is on the roof to melt. That gives you icicles and potential ice dams. Now, when we had the roof replaced, they put an extensive ice and water shield. So when we first moved in, we had a year with ice dams. I mean, with water pouring in the second floor window frames. That's how bad it was. So I knew I had a serious problem. When we had the roof replaced, it only happened that one year, and then it didn't happen again. We had the roof replaced, we had extensive ice and water shield, so that should kind of solve that problem. But we still had those icicles forming and dripping onto the front steps. Okay, so this year, just a couple of weeks ago in fact, I started adding this insulation. And notice I've only added it so far just over the front step area. I've actually added it over the back section also, but primarily I started just over the front steps. I started just with four rafter bays that were centered right over the front steps, and that's why you still see snow on the roof right over the front steps. The reason is because the heat from the house is not getting to the rafter boards anymore once I put up this insulation, and this stopped the icicles from forming because the water would no longer melt on this area. And actually, after we had a year of the ice dams, I actually bought several rolls, about 6 rolls of this insulation, with the intention of adding that in a previous year. And then of course I had good intentions, but I did not follow through, and we didn't have ice dams in any of the following years. But I did buy a snow rake. So if you have a snow rake, you can pull the snow off the roof, particularly on the lower portions of the roof. That can prevent the ice dams from forming. That was actually my solution to the ice dam because, of course, I purchased the snow rake immediately to stop the water from coming in the second floor windows. Then I subsequently got this insulation for a longer term fix, and then the problem never happened again. And this insulation sat until a couple of weeks ago, when, since I'm retired and I have extra time, I said, well, I'm going to take that insulation out. I'm going to add it to those rafter bays, and that's going to keep the snow from melting on the portion of the roof where I've added the insulation. Now, the attic is still relatively uninsulated and pretty cold because most of the rafter bays are not insulated, so, and it's got plenty of ventilation, so it's still cold. But the snow does not melt on that section. And the other thing that I did was, in other sections where I saw mold growing, I added the insulation for the specific purpose to prevent the mold from growing, because I also identified that as a problem. Now, the mold I noticed was only growing in the middle third of the house. In other words, if I go to the rafter base over there towards the end, there is no mold growth. But if I went to the ones in the middle, either in the front or the back, there was mold growth. The reason was there's a lot of moisture generated in the middle of the house because the upstairs bathroom is right over there. There's another upstairs bathroom, master bath over there. There are these caps. There is the stairwell. In other words, it turns out the middle of the house is more leaky than the other portions of the house. So there's more moisture that gets up into the attic in the center portion. And those are the portions where I could see mold growing. So what I did was, I'm going to cover all that up with this insulation. Now what happens is, that this is a water vapor. This is a vapor barrier here on the, so that water vapor can't get to those boards now, okay? It can still get into the attic. It could still condense, for example, possibly on some of these other boards, but that's a different issue right now. I first did all the ones in the middle. I have a plan for doing all the other ones now later, but I did it with the ones where there was a problem, and those are the ones that was in the middle. Okay. Now when you add this for the rafters, you don't add it to full thickness. Okay, this is a 6¼ inch batt. You can use it on 2x6 wall where it compresses all the way into the cavity, but in the rafter, it's a 2x8 rafter, so that's a 7-inch cavity. So even when this is placed in, there's still a 1 inch there's 1 inch between the roof board and the batt, and that 1 inch, along with the soffit vent and the ridge vent up on the top, provides an air channel for the water vapor to escape. It's not trapped. There is a vapor barrier, but the vapor barrier has, some penetrations in it. It's not perfect. And that water vapor will work its way up because it's lighter than air, and it works its way up. It will get, and eventually, the theory is it will get out the ridge vent. Okay, and in the meantime, you don't get that mold. Any mold that does form here, of course, you don't even see it if there were small amounts, and it wouldn't become airborne and all that sort of thing for the exact same reason. It's all covered up. So this insulation, it solves a number of problems, okay? This house has insulation in the floor deck. It's got a significant amount of insulation here. It's much harder to add more insulation at this point, okay? Because number one, I've got all this stuff already in the attic. And any air leaks eventually will get to that roof deck. So protecting the roof deck directly in a way that has a ventilation channel and can be sealed can solve this problem. Now, the attic is also going to be relatively cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter, especially after these other bays have been completed. In other words, when this insulation becomes more complete, this will also cut down on the heating bill. There is, of course, the expense and labor of putting in this insulation, but I do have time now, and it's not terribly expensive. Actually, these fiberglass rolls are not terribly expensive. Probably can do the entire attic here for probably under $1,000, or around that amount. Okay, so that's what I just wanted to go over. I am working out some of the final details here on things like when I put these in here, I still left that last section where the ridge vent is exposed so that humidity could work its way out through the ridge vent. And when you look down on where this hits where this insulation batt hits the deck or the soffit, that's not sealed. That just runs down to that point. Okay, so this is not what you call airtight. But I could try sealing that area and sealing that area. That would make the attic tighter, and it would also preserve the channel, the air channel, which allows for humidity, which works its way through all of these imperfections. Imperfections like it's not airtight, and the various rips that are inevitable. It does work its way up, and then it does ventilate out. So it's a combination of increasing the warmth in the attic in the winter, cooler in the summer, still being able to vent out the humidity, not having mold growth, not having icicle form, not having ice dams form, not having the front steps be unsafe, not having any mold spores getting into the actual air. So anyway, there's a tremendous number of benefits here for the amount of work that's involved in doing it, and the attic will be somewhat more comfortable. Okay, that's all. It went on rather long, but thank you for listening. Bye.